Are.
We are
Okay.
not live. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Hope you are.
I am. Catherine and I are far flung. She's at one end of North Carolina, and I'm in the middle.
Mhm.
And we see
I'm
each
busy working on feasibility studies, Gail.
other. Are you? Well, funny, we should talk about that today, right?
It's a timely topic.
We get so many questions, everybody, about feasibility studies, capital campaign feasibility studies. Why do we need to invest in one? Should we really go to this trouble? It's a lot of work, too much burden on the staff. We don't believe consultants. We had a bad experience with a consultant years ago, and so our board will not touch a consultant again. Haven't you heard all that, Catherine?
Every bit of it. But you know what? It comes around. So it does. I do. And we also, I'll tell this story since there's sort of a the topic today has to do with do one or don't do one. Many of our clients have come to us to talk about a feasibility study and ask us to do one because guess what? They tried a campaign without one.
Ooh.
Didn't
And
go
what
so well.
tell everybody the experience our client outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Tell us about that experience. This is a great story, everybody.
This is a great story. So we have a client in Nashville, Tennessee, a great client, I will say, a plus client.
Our top performing clients.
We
They
should
really
do one on what how to be a good client sometime. Anyway, they're a great client. And they had a campaign a number of years back before they contacted us about their current campaign. And that campaign, they raised $6 million. Nice number. They did complete it. But it took them 5 years to raise it. It was very painful. Their board, I'm sure many of you have heard this, was exhausted and really felt we needed brand new donors, just the whole gamut. We heard it all, every bit of it. So they hired us with, and I will say with some skepticism
yeah.
on part of the board
This
and
may
part
be
of
what,
the,
10 years
which
later,
is
10 years later.
yeah, no, about 8 years later, maybe not quite 10. And but they knew they couldn't do this much larger campaign, which now is $38 million. So remember $6 million I told you about 5 years, $38 million in sure about the same period of time. Their campaign, we did their feasibility study, which gave them a roadmap. This is very key. Feasibility study is not a go, no go proposition per se, but it is, however, gives you a roadmap and it informs key decisions an organization needs to make about their campaign with the guiding hand of your consultant. So let me finish the story. So they've embarked on this campaign, and in the first 2 years,
With our help, with
with
our
our
help.
help, I'm still working with them very closely. Um, we're with the first 2 years of their active fundraising in their campaign, they're just getting ready to cross the $16 million mark. Okay, remember what I said, 5 years, $6 million, painful. 2 years, they're at $16 million, almost halfway towards their $38 million goal, and they are happy. Their board is happy. Their CEO is ecstatic. The staff is doing a stellar job. So that's a difference.
The difference. Can you imagine the painful process of raising 6 million in 8 years and then in 2 million doubling that or tripling that?
Mm-hmm. This is a really great story.
So a smart study done by seasoned experienced consultants, you have the raw data from talking to all your donors, but the consultants bring years and years of experience. We have seen it all. We know where the roadblocks are. We know how to read donors and read CEOs and read board members, I think, after all these years. Don't you think, Catherine?
Absolutely agree with that, Gail. I mean, and the other piece we're able to bring, because as Gail's saying, and this is a very important aspect that a consultant brings, is all the experience. And if you can frame it this way, the lens at which we view this information. So we're coming at this with a perspective of objectivity, which is often used about consultants in this. But there's truth in that objectivity, but that objectivity is the culmination of those years of experience. It's not just we're objective with no skin in the game. That's not exactly the case. So what you could say is we're able to kind of be able to look at all the component parts that could be impacting your campaign positively or negatively, And then we help you put those in the right order or help you get beyond the roadblocks. Those kind of things is what the feasibility study helps do. And it gives you, it really does, really does inform decision making. I have one more quick story. I was with a board not too long ago talking about a feasibility study. And boards typically think, well, you need to have one, but they don't really know what one is and they're not sure. And they tend to see it as, we're going to tell you, yes, you can raise that money, or we're going to tell you, no, you can't. And that's it. And so this, after I was describing kind of all this, what a roadmap is and what it gives you and all this kind of stuff, one board member, suddenly I just literally see the light bulb go off in this man's head. And he goes, so you mean it's not binary? Meaning, he was saying, meaning it's a yes or no proposition, that the feasibility study just comes back with the one page that says no, or one page that says yes, kind of thing. And he said, so it tells us a lot of information. It tells us a lot about our strategy for our campaign and options that we might be able to do to reach our achieved, our desired achievement with our campaign, and ultimately do all these wonderful things for our organization. And my answer was, yes, that is what it does for you.
Because the thing is that having a thoughtful, smart feasibility study done by seasoned consultants. Remember, we're talking to, we should probably talk about what a feasibility study really is. It's a set of
Mm-hmm.
private donor interviews in which we ask donors how they feel about the organization, how they feel about this project. Are they enthusiastic?
Mm-hmm.
Are they excited? Would they like to be part of this? And when it rolls forward, who do they think would be the other donors?
Mm-hmm.
What strategies and advice might they offer about these other donors? And most importantly, we're always looking for the leaders. Who among your donor group is willing to step up and be a campaign leader? Right,
Mm-hmm.
Catherine?
Right. So let me say it this way.
Mhm.
When you've baked a really great pie yourself, don't you enjoy it, eating it, the fruits of your labor? That's sort of what a feasibility study is kind of like. It's like this, putting together this recipe and helping you bake this wonderful thing and turn it into something, that this buy-in. And that's what Gail's talking about. And we call it the donor voice when we talk about the interviews. This voice, your donors, who are the people who are going to give to your campaign, which is the most important ingredient of any campaign. People love to flock to a case statement first. We should do something on that. But that's not the most important thing. I mean, your messages are important, but your donors' readiness and willingness to participate and support your project vis-a-vis their gifts through your campaign, that's the key ingredient. So why would you do work on anything but that? Preparing for your campaign. And the feasibility study is a really critical first step in engaging that voice, those donors who are going to participate in your campaign. And now you've made them part of baking your pie. They're going to enjoy that better and more, and find it very delicious, because they're going to hear their voice throughout your entire campaign. That donor voice starts there at the feasibility study and arcs through the entire campaign all the way to the end. And so that thread of weaving together your campaign strategy is absolutely critical. And that is the top benefit of doing a feasibility study.
Really is. We talk a lot about treating donors like they're the whole person,
Mhm.
engage their brain, their heart, their passions, and don't treat them like they're just a money bank, because
Mhm.
that's the transactional approach. We all know that relationship-oriented major fundraising achieves much larger gifts from happy donors, rather than just a simple transactional approach, as we all know. And we probably beat that in everybody's head, I hope. But,
Agreed.
but hearing your donor's voice and treating them as insiders, bringing them on board early, it's one of the most important things you can ever do to really lay the groundwork. A good feasibility study helps the organization set the dominoes up. I love to use an image of dominoes, Catherine.
Mhm.
Everything is ready. You've got your campaign leadership. You've tested your messaging with your donors. You've
Mhm.
tested how your donors feel about the project, and you've tweaked the project to make sure that it's what the donors really want and
Mhm.
what they're willing to invest in.
Mhm.
Um, and you've enlisted those key influencers as campaign leaders, and you've enlisted them properly we have a proprietary approach to campaign leadership that's been very successful. All these pieces and your staff. Your staff
Mhm.
is hired, they're on board, they're experienced, they're ready. Your systems, your acknowledgement systems, everything internally is ready. Get all this ready. This is
Mhm.
the big work. This is the body of work to start a campaign. And I would say the more thoroughly you spend stacking up these dominoes, when you're ready to launch and start asking, it's like boop, all the dominoes go click, 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 and everything rolls out, just like this wonderful client near Nashville.
Mhm.
They are raising money so quickly and they're thrilled. The board is happy. Remember, the board was skeptical. They
Mhm.
had had a bad experience with consultants. Hey,
Mhm.
everybody, if y'all have had a bad experience with consultants, talk to us.
So I will also, I'll tell a story about that donor voice and related to messages, because a lot of times I think when, and I sat in y'all's, whoever's listening, who's in working in your organization, worked in organizations for years, decades actually. So sat in the chair, being on the other side, hiring consultants. So now I am a consultant, but I've worked with consultants from the other side. And so talking about the donor voice, so many times when you're working with your own donors, you're so attuned to what they're saying. It's more that you want to hear them, but you take that with not a lot of interpretation all the time. I'm not saying that not everybody interprets it, but there's a different interpretation. So this story was one of our client years ago, one of the first campaigns I worked on when I started working with Gail. And what was interesting in that feasibility, and it was a habitat, one of our first habitat clients, and they were wanting to raise money to buy land. Now you would think, if you would think that would be an automatic, no, hands down resonating message. Yes, need land to put a house on. Okay. But somehow, for some reason, that was never what this particular habitat affiliate had really talked about with their potential, with their donors. And so donors came back and said, well, I don't really understand the land thing, but I really do want to help with the houses thing. Well, all it took, so you could have just said, okay, well, we're just going to focus on the houses because the donors don't like the land thing. But all it took was, and we came back and said, this is what they're saying. Remember the donor's voice. But here's what we need to do. We need to shift the message just a little bit to help the donors understand why the land is so critical and why you need to do this in this campaign. And that ended up being hugely successful. And they raised them. Not only did they raise the money that they wanted to raise to buy land from the same set of people plus more who told us in the feasibility study that they really weren't sure about the land thing. They came back around and said, yes, now I get it. Here's my large gift for your land, for land purchasing. And they were able during the campaign to buy a large tract of land to build another subdivision. So it was a great success story. But it could have gone the other way if they hadn't had us to interpret what that donor voice and help them shift the message so that it could turn out they were able to have a successful campaign raising money for what they truly needed.
Yeah. Let's go down the list of what you should expect out of a smart feasibility study with experienced consulting firms like Gale Perry Group. A little plug there. But no, really, what are you going to get out of it? You're going to get information on your goal, whether you think the overall campaign goal is achievable, whether it's whether donors are going to support it, or whether that goal may be too low. The working
Mhm.
goal may be too low. So the goal data is really critical, and you really want to know that right off.
Mhm.
You want
Mhm.
to get their feedback on your messaging, just like Catherine was describing the project itself and the messaging around the project. Those things are shaped in your case statement based on the research that you're doing with your donors. Remember, your feasibility study is your due diligence. It is
Mhm.
a donor market survey, so to speak. I love to put it in that framework. Let's talk a little bit about what the board. Lots of times, board members of nonprofits are unsure about campaigns. They may be uncomfortable thinking about these large amounts of money.
Mhm.
They may want you to back off. And if they're nervous, they're going to push for a smaller goal rather than a larger goal.
Mhm.
So tell everybody how we keep the board happy, engaged, and going forward, Catherine.
Well, one of the key things is to keep the board informed and of what's happening. I mean, this is again, it's a big undertaking. We are empathetic to those feelings of nervousness and concern. They don't want any, keep in mind, no board wants anything to fail on their watch. Okay. So no board anywhere, any board. So what we do and what we focus on is really helping them, educate them around their role, also educate them around, why we think this will work, help them and keep them apprised of what the strategy we're recommending. And part of that is particularly how we talk to them about once the feasibility study results are completed and the report's completed, a very in-depth time with the board, with our client, and very important that they understand the strategy that's being recommended for your organization, because that is what helps build their confidence and help them, more importantly, help them support you with your campaign. This is really critical. So it's just a lot of iterative small steps that are important to take with a board so that they are understanding. And it starts early in the process. I was in a call yesterday with a client board chair, just very early, wasn't even a feasibility study interview. It was just an early time to talk about what his concerns are, what the board what he perceives board concerns to be, so that we can more deeply understand, and to be able to support them and help them move forward.
And one of the best things about a consultant, when a consultant is helping you set up the campaign, is that we provide political cover for the staff team.
Mm-hmm.
We say the tough stuff. We'll be going away one day, but you have to stay there forever.
Mm-hmm.
You really want to have that extra outside experienced counsel offering their highly experienced professional opinion about strategy rather than fighting the battles yourself. Sometimes I think that's one of the greatest values that consultants bring to this whole
Mm-hmm.
campaign
Agree.
process is
Mm-hmm.
is being the voice of experience that board
Mm-hmm.
members will listen to when sometimes they're not so willing to listen to the staff team.
I think I shared this with you earlier. I'm on the board of AFP Triad. If you're in the Triad area and not a member of AFP, please consider joining. I just got to plug a little bit. It's a great group of people, a lot of education and opportunity to learn more about our field. So I was in a board meeting this morning, and someone saw our LinkedIn Live, but promotion to post this. And I said, yeah. He said, I said, how I feel about feasibility studies. I think you should have one. And she turned to me and said, I would never do a campaign without one. Now, this is not someone we've worked with as a client. This is just someone else out there saying, I would never do one without one. So, talk to your peers, talk to colleagues that have done campaigns before, and find out what they thought about getting a feasibility study and how it helped them, as well as listening to what we're saying here, because I truly do believe in every campaign I worked in, again, sitting on the other side of the aisle, so to speak, in the client side. I never had a campaign that I was involved in or led that hadn't had a study done. And they were always very helpful, even if sometimes the strategy evolves. Working with a consultant and in those cases work with consultants, can really help you think through what turn do we need to take to, I was dealing with a very large campaign as the internal director when we went through the Great Recession. I'm sure you're all thinking about the economic times of today. It was really helpful to have our consultant that we had there to be able to talk through what we were dealing with, how we needed to shift our strategy, to deal with the external environment that we were having to manage our campaign in. And the campaign still moved forward, and we did really well. So it's very helpful to have that lens.
And Catherine, we have a question from Jessica about the role of data and predictive modeling as a study. Ooh. And versus studies that might only focus on selected donor conversations. I think the modern feasibility study is going to use both strategies. You really want those oral interviews with donors because you need their own words.
Yeah.
You need the actual experience of them. They need to have the engagement experience with the consultant and with the staff team regarding the feasibility study. But let's talk a bit about data and predictive modeling. What do you think, Catherine?
Well, absolutely. And actually, one of the things we haven't talked about at all is that before we start, the interviews that Gail's talking about, kind of what, so, to use the academic parlance, the qualitative portion of the study, we do the quantitative portion, so the analysis and so forth. So whether we're doing well screening or looking at particular data from the client that we request from the client, to look at fundraising patterns and where areas of success are, things like retention, various data points. We do look at all of that very carefully, and we begin to kind of assess early, is there untapped or latent potential within the client donor base that could be, this was the case of the client I mentioned, the first story I told about the client in Tennessee. There was significant latent capacity within their donor pool. And it was a matter of, could they unlock it? Because we actually did not find any lead gifts identified in the qualitative or the interviews themselves, which, you can go out on a limb a little bit and say, and which we did, and said, look, it's here. You have it. And these donors have affinity for your organization. So this is sort of loosely predictive, not really truly predictive modeling, but it was a data analysis that told us there, that we were able to inform the client that it's there, but this is what it's going to take. And we outlined the kind of steps that it would take to potentially unlock that capacity. And that capacity was so large, they didn't need to unlock but a small percentage of it to be able to do what they're doing. And that is exactly what they did. They took those steps, they hired an additional gift officer, and they were able. So that really came out of the data analysis. More than it came out of the interviews.
So we really use both. We would recommend using both. And of course, AI and predictive modeling are advancing every day, and we're having fun keeping up with the latest ways we can use it to predict capital campaign gifts. Catherine, we have another question from Paige. Would you ever advise that an organization perform their own study rather than using a consultant? And so I have some thoughts, and then I'll ask Catherine to share her thoughts. If you don't have a consultant, you don't have that voice of experience. You don't have years and years of experience with campaigns to help and lay out the strategy. So you are going to do the strategy yourself. Hopefully you are if you're going to try one yourself, you need to be very experienced. You need to have a board that's going to stick with you and back you up. Because one of the things we said earlier is that we take care of the board and try to keep the board members in line, engaged, and supporting the plan, which sometimes can be a large body of work, and it can be an emotional and mental drain on the staff team to have to deal with board members who are not aligned. And so we're like the traffic cops sometimes.
Yeah.
So yes, you can do your own feasibility study. You are giving up some things. You're giving up an expert having a gentle gift conversation with your donors, and we know how to move that donor right along. So again, I don't know how experienced your interviewers may be. I'm sure you can come up with some level of information. I'll also say something else about having an outside team do the study. It's a lot of work. And I mean, you're packing in a lot of work in 3 months. Just the idea, can you, in your job as leading a development team, can you pull off having 30 to 40 thoughtful interviews with your lead donors over a period of a month? Because and then do you have time to really formulate it all together to create a sophisticated campaign strategy based on your data from your donors? So I mean, yes, you can give it a try. You're losing a lot. And it'll depend on your experience. So what do you think, Catherine?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think too, I will say also this way, it's always valuable that you talk to your donors. And a lot of times clients, I mean, you'll hear people say, well, the interviewee, the donor person, whoever they are, will tell something to the consultant that they won't tell you. I mean, yes and no. There's yes and no, but here's the thing that's really important is that there's a way that a good consultant doing the study interviews brings a level of objectivity that creates not afraid to ask the next question. So if the donor does say, it's not even saying anything negative, like Gail said, we have a gentle gift conversation in here. I'm always amazed at how many times that people have never asked their donors, where do we rate in your philanthropic priorities? Or have you ever considered this type of gift? Or do you give from a foundation or a donor advised fund? Or how do you make your gifts? Which are questions that we're able to ask from a lens of objectivity, because we don't have any motivation other than to find out a deeper information as to what might motivate and move this donor forward and what might be that strategy that is best, because they know we're not soliciting them. We tell them that right up front, not soliciting you. This is not, but I am going to ask you a few questions. If the donor says they don't want to answer them, that's fine too. But you would be amazed. Most people do answer these questions and they're willing to share this information with us. That's the objectivity. And it's not that they won't tell you to, but oftentimes people don't ask the questions, or the questions are coming from a different motivation from the organization than from the consultant. So the motivation behind the questions that are being asked and by whom are really critical, that, and that's how the information is we're able to distill that information from individuals through those interviews and then use it, as I said earlier, the donor voice, to inform the strategies that we recommend to the client.
Mhm. And we need to wrap up, Catherine, but I do want to say one thing about um, consultant-led feasibility studies is that what you're really getting out of your feasibility study is your campaign strategy.
100%.
And the campaign strategy is going to have the timing, the goal, the leadership, the way to motivate donors, the messaging, all of that. I mean, the decisions you have to make about campaign strategy are detailed and sophisticated and scary, quite frankly. And these decisions that you're making can either shoot your campaign in the foot or move it forward to success. And so the reason I would suggest that you probably do want an experienced consultant backing up your study is that you need that sophisticated campaign strategy that's completely tailored to your organization and not a template, not not a pro forma, but is customized and unique to you. So, Catherine, last thought?
Well, agree with all of that, Gail, very much so. But I think, again, I think you can, if you're thinking about a campaign, you really should seriously consider tackling a feasibility study or campaign planning study. They go under both names. And using a consultant would be really important and beneficial to you.
And if you're planning a campaign, please reach out to us. We're happy to have a strategy call, find out more about how we work, and our team of very, very seasoned consultants who are wonderful, quite smart, and quite strategic, if I should say so.
It
Thanks a
was
lot.
great.
Thanks for joining.